Welcome to WispHollow Tales. Take a seat, settle in, and let me tell you a story. I've done a lot of stupid things in my life, but nothing compares to what I did that night. It started with a door I never should have opened. If I'd known what was waiting for me on the other side, I would have walked away and never looked back. But curiosity got the better of me, and that's when everything changed. I know it sounds dramatic, but I can't get it out of my head. The second I turned the knob, something around me shifted. It wasn't just the door. It was like the whole atmosphere around me changed, like I'd crossed some invisible line and there was no going back. I had no business being in that place to begin with. An old house at the edge of town, the kind you pass by 100 times without giving a second thought. But that night, something about it called to me. I can't explain it. I was out for a walk, minding my own business, when I saw it. There was this faint light coming from one of the upstairs windows. I'd never seen anyone there before, so naturally, curiosity got the better of me. I walked up to the porch, hesitated for a second, but then figured I'd knock, maybe see if anyone needed help. No one answered, but the door was slightly ajar. Just enough to make me think someone had forgotten to close it. That should have been my first sign to leave, but I didn't. Instead, I stepped inside. The house was quiet, like the air itself was holding its breath. The floor creaked under my weight, but the sound seemed to vanish into the darkness around me. The air smelled stale, like old wood and dust, with something else I couldn't quite place. I called out, "Hello?" But my voice sounded small, swallowed by the shadows. Then I saw it. At the end of the hall, a door. Not just any door, though. This one was different, almost out of place. It was newer than the rest of the house, with a polished brass knob and smooth wood that hadn't aged like the rest of the house. Something about it felt wrong, but I couldn't look away. My feet started to move before I even realized what I was doing. My feet carrying me toward it, step by step. I should never have opened that door. The second I did, the temperature in the room plummeted. My breath caught in my throat, and I could feel a presence, something beyond that door, something I wasn't meant to see. The space beyond it was dark, too dark to make out anything clearly, but I could feel it watching me. Whatever was in there had been waiting, and I had just given it an invitation. I slammed the door shut, but it was too late. The house wasn't the same anymore. I could feel it, shifting around me, closing in. The walls seemed to pulse, almost like they were breathing, and every sound was amplified. The creaks of the floorboards, the hum of the wind outside, my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. I turned to leave, but the hallway was different now, stretching longer than it had been before. The front door, the one I had come through, was nowhere in sight. Just more shadows and doors, all closed, all waiting. And now, I don't know how to get out. I stood there, frozen, my back pressed against the door. I could feel the cold radiating through the wood, like whatever was on the other side was still waiting for me to come back. My breath came in shallow gasps as I stared down the hallway that wasn't supposed to be there. The door I came in through, gone. Just more endless shadows and unfamiliar doors lining the walls. I knew I needed to move, to find a way out, but my legs felt like lead. Something was wrong with this house. Wrong in a way I couldn't even put into words. The air itself felt heavy, thick, like it was pressing in on me, trying to force me deeper inside. I took a step forward, then another, my footsteps echoing louder than they should have. The hallway seemed to stretch on forever, and the more I walked, the less familiar it became. It felt like the house was shifting, changing every time I blinked, like it was playing some kind of sick game with me. That's when I heard it. A soft, almost imperceptible scraping sound, coming from behind one of the closed doors. My heart skipped a beat, and I stopped dead in my tracks. I didn't want to open another door. Not after what happened with the last one. But the sound came again, like something was dragging itself across the floor, slow and deliberate. I edged closer, every instinct screaming at me to turn around, to run, but my curiosity got the better of me again. I couldn't help it. I had to know what was behind that door. I reached out, my hand trembling as I grasped the knob. It was cold, colder than it should have been, and as I twisted it, I braced myself for whatever was waiting on the other side. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a dimly lit room. At first glance, it looked normal. Just an empty room, old furniture covered in sheets, dust hanging in the air. But then I saw it, in the corner. A figure, hunched over, its back to me, slowly dragging its hand along the floor. The hair on the back of my neck stood up as I realized it hadn't noticed me yet. I stood there, frozen, my heart hammering in my chest. I knew I should close the door and back away, but I couldn't. My feet were rooted to the spot. The figure's movements were slow, deliberate, as if it was searching for something. I watched, my breath caught in my throat as it slowly turned its head. The figure's head turned slowly, too slowly, like it was testing the air before locking onto me. As its face came into view, my stomach twisted into a knot. It wasn't human. The features were blurred, like someone had tried to mold a face out of clay and left it unfinished. Eyes too large, mouth too wide. Its skin, if you could call it that, was pale, almost translucent, and its lips curled into a grotesque, unnatural grin. I stumbled backward, my back slamming into the door frame. The thing cocked its head, almost as if it were listening, but its eyes never left mine. For a moment it stayed completely still, just watching me. Then, with a sickening slowness, it began to crawl toward me, dragging its limbs in jerky, unnatural movements across the floor. I panicked. My mind raced as I fumbled for the door handle behind me, desperate to shut it, to put a barrier between me and whatever that thing was. The door creaked in protest, but I managed to slam it shut just as the figure reached the threshold. The sound of it hitting the door, a dull thud, echoed through the hallway, followed by a scratch. Like nails dragging down the wood. I stood there, panting, my hand still gripping the doorknob. The scratching continued, slow and methodical, almost like it was trying to find a weak spot. My heart pounded in my ears, and I took a step back, the hallway spinning around me. The air felt thinner now, and every breath was a struggle. The house had changed again. The hallway wasn't stretching anymore, but I noticed doors where there hadn't been any before. And the lights, what little there had been, were dimming, flickering like they were struggling to stay on. I didn't have much time. Whatever was on the other side of that door wasn't going to stay there for long. I turned and started running, my feet pounding against the floor. The hallway twisted and turned, leading me deeper into the house. No matter how fast I ran, it felt like the walls were closing in around me, the shadows creeping closer, swallowing everything in their path. Then, out of nowhere, I stumbled into a new room. The door slammed shut behind me, and for a brief moment everything was still. Too still. The room was small, barely lit by a single flickering light bulb hanging from the ceiling. The walls were bare, but the feeling of being watched hadn't gone away. In fact, it was stronger now. I scanned the room looking for an exit, but there wasn't one. No windows, no doors, just solid walls. My chest tightened as panic crept in. How had I gotten here? How could a room have no way out? Then I noticed something. The walls weren't solid after all. They were, shifting. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the surface seemed to ripple, like the house itself was breathing. And that's when I saw them, faces pressing against the walls, their features distorted like they were trapped inside the very structure of the house. Silent, watching, pleading. My breath caught in my throat. I stumbled backward, my hands reaching for something, anything, but the walls were cold slick, like they were alive. I wanted to scream, to do something, but I couldn't. I was frozen, watching as the faces shifted, their mouths opening in silent cries, their eyes locked on me. I felt the floor beneath me quiver, like something beneath the surface was moving. And then the room started to shrink. It was subtle at first. The walls slowly closing in, the ceiling lowering inch by inch. But as the space grew tighter, my heartbeat pounded in my ears. I had to get out. I pressed against the walls, but they pushed back, almost like they were resisting. The faces, there were more of them now, pushing closer to the surface, their eyes following my every move. The walls were closing in, and the air was growing thinner. My mind raced. I needed to find a way out. I turned in circles, searching for a hidden door, a crack in the floor, anything that could get me out of this living tomb. I saw it, a small, jagged crack in the far corner, barely visible in the dim light. I scrambled toward it, my fingers scraping at the edges, pulling at the wall as it gave way. The crack widened, just enough for me to squeeze through. But just as I was about to slip through, I heard it, a low, guttural growl from somewhere deep inside the house. Whatever was behind that door I had opened, it was coming for me. The growl echoed through the walls, vibrating beneath my feet, and I knew I didn't have much time. My fingers scraped at the jagged crack in the corner, widening it just enough to squeeze my body through. I didn't care where it led, but anywhere was better than staying in that room. I crawled through the opening, my skin catching on the rough edges, but I didn't stop. The space on the other side was narrow, dark, and cold. I couldn't stand up, so I had to crawl, the walls of the tunnel pressing in on me from all sides. It was suffocating, but I could hear that growl getting closer, louder, like it was following me through the house. The further I went, the more twisted the tunnel became. It felt endless, but there was no turning back now. My hands were raw from pulling myself forward, but finally I saw it, a faint light up ahead. I pushed myself harder, desperate to reach it before whatever was behind me closed in. As I emerged from the tunnel, the light grew brighter, almost blinding. I stumbled into a wide open room, my chest heaving, trying to catch my breath. It took me a moment to realize where I was. I was in the front hall, the same hall I had entered through. Only now it was different. The air was heavier, thick with the scent of decay. The door, the one that had disappeared, was back and it was right in front of me. An exit. But before I could even take a step, I heard the creak of the floorboards behind me. I didn't need to look. I could feel it. Whatever I had disturbed when I opened that door, it was here, in the room with me. The growl rumbled low, vibrating through my chest. I took a deep breath and forced myself to turn around. It stood at the far end of the hall, shrouded in shadow, its form shifting and twisting, like it was made of the very walls themselves. Those eyes, if they were even eyes, glowed faintly, locked on me. It didn't move, but I could feel it, drawing closer, like the very air between us was folding in on itself. I had no choice. I bolted for the door. The hallway seemed to stretch again as I ran, the distance between me and the exit growing with every step. But I kept running, my lungs burning, my feet pounding the floor. The growl was getting louder, the shadows closing in around me. I reached for the door, my fingers brushing the handle just as the walls behind me groaned, the creature lunging forward with a hiss. I yanked the door open, stumbling out into the cold night air. The world outside felt like it snapped back into place the moment I crossed the threshold, the oppressive weight lifting instantly. I didn't stop running, not until I was far enough away to be sure that whatever was in that house couldn't follow. And I've never looked back since. So, if you ever find yourself in a place that doesn't feel right, and there's a door that seems out of place, leave it alone. Some doors are meant to stay closed. I learned that the hard way. Whatever's on the other side might not be something you can handle. And once you open it, you might not be able to shut it again. Thanks for joining me for this tale of curiosity gone wrong. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to WispHollow Tales for more eerie stories. And remember, some doors are better left shut. Until next time, stay curious, but stay safe.